That box on your neighbor's roof heating their shower water is probably not what you think it is. It is not a solar electric panel. A solar water heater does not make electricity at all. It skips that whole step and turns sunlight straight into hot water, using technology that is older and a lot simpler than the photovoltaic panels everyone pictures. And once you see how it actually works, the whole thing stops looking like high-tech and starts looking like a clever garden hose left out in the sun on a hot afternoon. That mix-up trips up almost everyone who searches this, because both kinds sit on a roof and both involve the sun. But they are two different machines built for two different jobs. I went through the Department of Energy's breakdowns and a stack of installer guides so you do not have to, and the heating version is genuinely easy to understand. Let me walk you through it the way the heat travels, from the roof down to your faucet. Every solar water heater comes down to two parts. There is a collector, which is the flat box or the row of glass tubes mounted up on the roof. And there is a storage tank, a well-insulated tank that holds the hot water until somebody turns on a tap. The collector catches the sun, the tank keeps what the collector made. Almost everything else you read about is just a different way of moving heat between those two pieces. So start at the top with the collector. The trick here is something you already know from real life. A black car sitting in a parking lot in July gets blistering hot, while a white car parked right next to it stays cooler. Dark surfaces soak up sunlight and turn it into heat far better than light ones do. A collector takes that simple fact and builds a whole box around it. Inside is a dark absorber plate or a dark coated tube, sealed under glass, and that dark surface gets hot fast in direct sun. Water or a special fluid runs right past that hot surface, picks up the heat and carries it away. That is the entire secret of the thing. There is no fuel and nothing burning. Sunlight hits something dark, the dark thing gets hot, and the heat gets handed off to water moving through it. Everything else in the system exists to move that water around and keep the heat from leaking back out. Which brings us to the next question. How does the water actually get from the roof down into your tank and back up again? There are two answers, and they split solar water heaters into two families. The first family is passive, and it has no pump, no electronics, nothing that can really break. It runs on a piece of physics you have seen in a pot of water on the stove. Hot water rises and cold water sinks. Installers call it the thermosiphon effect. In one common passive setup, the tank sits above the collector. The sun heats the water in the collector, that warm water naturally floats up into the tank, and cooler water from the bottom of the tank slides down to take its place. The whole loop turns itself slowly and quietly with the sun doing all the work. These systems are cheap, they last a long time, and there is almost nothing to maintain. The second family is active, and it adds a small electric pump and a controller. The controller watches the temperature and switches the pump on when the collector is hotter than the tank, pushing the fluid through on purpose instead of waiting for it to drift. Active systems cost more and have parts that can eventually wear out, but they move heat more efficiently and you have more control over them. Most larger or cold climate installations in the United States are active for exactly that reason. That pump question hides a bigger one, and it matters most if you live anywhere it freezes. What happens to the water sitting up in that rooftop collector on a cold winter night? If it is plain household water, it can freeze, expand, and crack the collector or burst a pipe. That is an expensive mistake to wake up to. So cold climate systems do not run drinking water through the roof at all. They run a non-freezing heat transfer fluid, usually food-grade propylene glycol, through the collector in a sealed loop. That loop never mixes with your drinking water. It just carries heat down to a heat exchanger, which is basically a coil that warms the household water in the tank without the two ever touching. One safety note worth saying out loud, the antifreeze in these systems has to be the food-grade propylene glycol kind, not the automotive antifreeze sitting in your garage. Automotive antifreeze is toxic, and if a heat exchanger ever developed a leak, you do not want that anywhere near the water you drink and cook with. A real installer knows this. It is worth knowing yourself so you can ask the question. Not all collectors look the same either. The most common type is a flat plate collector, which is exactly what it sounds like. An insulated weatherproof box with that dark absorber plate under a sheet of glass. It is the proven affordable workhorse, and for most of the country, it is all you need. There is also the batch style, sometimes called an integral collector storage unit, where the storage tank itself sits inside a glazed box on the roof and the sun heats it directly. Those are simple and cheap, but really only suited to mild climates that rarely freeze. And then there are evacuated tube collectors, rows of glass tubes with a vacuum sealed around the absorber inside each one. That vacuum is the same idea as a thermos bottle. It stops the heat from leaking back out into cold air, so these perform noticeably better on freezing or cloudy days. They cost more, and you see them more often on commercial buildings. There is one more piece nobody should skip over, and it is the backup heater. The sun does not shine on demand. It sets every evening, and a gray day can supply less hot water than your family uses. So a solar water heater almost always works alongside a backup, either a regular gas or electric tank downstream, or an electric element built right into the solar storage tank. On a sunny week, the sun does the heavy lifting, and the backup barely turns on. On a stretch of bad weather, it quietly fills the gap so you never get a cold shower. The solar part is not so much replacing your water heater as doing most of its job for free. So here is what you actually get for all of this. The Department of Energy figures a solar water heater cuts the water heating part of your energy bill by somewhere between 50 and 80%, which works out to roughly $140 to $280 a year for a typical household. The collectors last 20 years and often longer. A flat plate system installed runs somewhere around $4,000 to $9,000 before any incentives, with evacuated tube setups costing more. There is one timing thing worth knowing if you are pricing this out right now. The 30% federal tax credit that used to take a big bite out of that cost expired at the end of 2025, so a system you buy and install today does not qualify for it anymore. Some states and utilities still offer their own incentives, so that is the first place to look before the federal change gives you sticker shock. And that is the whole machine. Sunlight hits a dark surface on the roof, that surface gets hot, a fluid carries the heat down to a tank, a pump or plain physics keeps it moving, and a backup heater covers the cloudy days. If you are weighing one for your own house, the two things to nail down first are your climate, which decides whether you need the freeze-safe version, and whether you want the simpler passive setup or the more efficient active one. I have dropped links in the description to the collector types and a few of the components mentioned here, so you can see exactly what each part looks like before you ever talk to an installer. Look up at one of those rooftop boxes now and you will know it is not making electricity. It is just catching the sun and handing it to your hot water.